Hello everybody. I have to warn you, this is one of the most infuriating videos I have ever done. We've all had a stupid boss. They say you don't quit jobs, you quit bosses. So I also had a stupid boss. I quit this job, I quit that boss. But imagine the dumbest boss you ever had has total control over your life and the life of your family. I am going to give you a list of 5 people who were killed because they were right. How annoying is that? Anyway, this list spans thousands of years, from 500 BC all the way up to 1943. Now, some of you might say, but that's over now. Human beings have evolved. Yes, that went on for thousands of years, but not anymore. We're in a lull. It's funny, and we're laughing about it now. I certainly am, although I laugh at everything. But if you're one of those people who doesn't accept the popular narrative, even when everybody is telling you you have to accept it, or if you're one of those people who's smarter than your boss and could do his job better than he could do it, or if you're one of those people who has to do all the work on the school group projects, then this video is for you. Because there was a time in history that those qualities would have gotten you burnt at the stake or sent to a camp. Human beings, what a species. So, without further ado, here are some of those examples. Those tragic examples. Number 5, Margaret Jones, the first person to be hanged in the Massachusetts witch trials. Remember a couple of videos back, I told you about how smart the people of the Massachusetts Bay Colony were, how literate and well-read? Well, I take it back. Maybe they were smart compared to people at the time, but sometimes being too smart can get you into trouble too. They were convinced that witches were real, that people were practicing witchcraft, and for the crime of practicing witchcraft, they should be hanged. You may notice that the English hanged their witches, whereas the continent burned theirs. So that's just a little note. I don't know where it's going to come up. I hope it doesn't come up in your day-to-day, because it shouldn't. Anyway, what was Margaret's crime? Well, she was a physician and a midwife. Yeah, she helped a lot of people. And so it could have been from a dissatisfied customer who reported her. It could have been anybody. We don't know too much about what exactly went on. We know she was the first one killed in 1648. 1648, a long time ago. I can read you the charges against her. There were many. Number 1, that she was found to have such a malignant touch as many persons, men, women, and children, whom she stroked or touched with any affection or displeasure, or etc., were taken with deafness or vomiting or other violent pains or sickness. She was a doctor. Sick people vomit. This one is easily explained away. This is kind of nitpicking, and it's the first one. It only goes downhill from there. Number 2, she, practicing physic, and her medicines being such things as, by her own confession, were harmless, as anise seed, liquors, etc., yet had extraordinary violent effects. So her medicine had side effects. Medicine has side effects. That's all the fine print. That's all the fast talking at the end of these commercials is side effects. I'm guessing they do that now so we don't form a lynch mob and hang the people at the drug companies. Although that wouldn't be a bad idea. I'm kidding. Don't form a lynch mob and go after the people at the drug companies. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. This is what these people did, and see how it turned out. Number 3, the third charge against Ms. Jones. She would use to tell such as would not make use of her physic. She would use to tell such as would not make use of her physic, that they would never be healed, and accordingly their diseases and hurts continued, with relapse against ordinary course, and beyond the apprehension of all physicians and surgeons. It's 1648. Y'all don't have real medicine. Chill. These are some bogus charges. This is nothing. Number 4. Some things which she foretold came to pass accordingly. Other things she would tell of, as secret speeches, etc., which she had no ordinary means to come to knowledge of. So she warned people about things that were going to happen. This is the charge. Maybe a thank you? Maybe you could get a thank you for that. Like, oh, thank you for warning me that if I don't take care of myself, I'm going to get sicker. And no ordinary means to come to the knowledge of. That's pretty vague. I'm going to say there was a town gossip, and Margaret never sold this gossip out. Props to Margaret for never selling the gossip out, because what is no ordinary means to come to knowledge of? That's nonsense. That's a nonsense charge. Number 5. She had upon search an apparent teat, as fresh as if it had been newly sucked, and after it had been scanned upon forced search, that it was withered, and another began on the opposite side. So I read that as some perverted Puritan is strip searching Margaret, finds a birthmark and says that it's a teat. Or there was no birthmark and they just made the whole thing up. What a bunch of jerks. I hope their Puritan hell is real and they are rotting in it right now. I hope their Puritan hell is real and they rot in it until as such time as they have learned their lesson, because I cannot, even in my petty heart, condemn someone to an eternal hell. But strip searching a woman, this is, ugh. They used to do stuff like this. They'd look around their naked body for it to be cold in there. It's freaking New England. It's freezing up there. And these clothed men are strip searching a woman who's done nothing but help the community to see if she has a teat. Screw these people. Okay, finally it's over. The last charge. Number 6. In the prison, in the clear daylight, there was seen in her arms, she sitting on the floor and her clothes up, etc., a little child, which ran from her into another room. And the officer followed it, and it vanished. The like child was seen in 2 other places to which she had relation, and one maid that saw it fell sick upon it, and was cured by the said Margaret, who used means to be employed to that end. Her behavior at her trial was very intemperate, lying notoriously, and railing upon the jury and witnesses, etc. Oh, can you blame her? And in the like distemper she died. The same day and hour she was executed, there was a great tempest at Connecticut, which blew down many trees, etc. What? At the same hour she... This is evidence from... This is insane. Blackjack, knock it off. This is not the order in which people are supposed to present evidence. You present the evidence. If there is sufficient evidence, then she is convicted, and then she is sentenced. You don't have evidence that comes from after the execution. This is putting the cart before the horse. Them only having had carts and horses back in the day. Also, this demon child, I'm going to call bullshit. I'm going to call bullshit on the demon child. I don't think there was a demon child. Massachusetts, the state of my birth, how could you? I expect this from Arkansas. I do not expect this from you, Massachusetts, even if it is 1648. What a black mark on our history. Massive black mark on the history of Massachusetts. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, people who come from Massachusetts. Also, back in the day, why did they kill their physicians? Weren't they sick all the time? Don't you need your physicians to treat the sick? It's like shooting yourself in the foot. You should bring this woman a cold beverage. If a physician or a scientist is trying to solve a problem that is harming the community, don't hang her. Ask her if she needs pipettes. Ask her if she's had some lunch. Bring her a sandwich and leave her alone. Oh my goodness. I'm so mad about this. 400 years later, I'm still mad about this. This is infuriating. Margaret Jones. R.I.P. Margaret Jones. We remember you. And yes, there's going to be a lot more witch trial material coming up, because witch trials combine my 2 favorite things in the whole world, which is the occult / natural science, which in the West for a long time were the same thing. Only recently, past couple hundred years, have they been split into 2 different fields. But combine that with courtroom drama. Who doesn't love a good courtroom drama? Maybe if it doesn't end with a poor woman getting hanged for trying to help people, but otherwise, I love a courtroom drama. I don't mess with time travel, but I would travel back in time to be at one of these trials. And I would give Margaret Jones the nod. I'd be like, I know what's up with you. I know it. I'm gonna make a video about you in like 400 years. Don't you worry about it. Keep your head high, girl. But she can't. She doesn't have really a choice because the news is gonna keep it high for her. But regardless, R.I.P. Margaret. Okay, number 4, Galileo Galilei. What did Galileo do? He taught that the sun was the center of the solar system. He agreed with the Copernicus model of the solar system. And he had a telescope so he could see the moons of Jupiter. And he was like, you know what? This looks like the sun is the center of the solar system. And the Catholic Church was like, no, that's heresy. He was like, no, I'm looking at the moons of Jupiter and it looks like the sun is the center. It just doesn't make any sense. This Earth-centered solar system, Earth-centered universe doesn't make any sense. And they were like, shut up, Galileo. And this on its own wouldn't bother me. We all know it's wrong, but it happened a while ago. So why am I still mad about it? Okay, so the other day I'm painting. I will show you my painting soon when it's ready. I'm painting and I'm listening to Catholic YouTube. And what do I hear on Catholic YouTube?
The church did hold a trial against Galileo and stripped him of his teaching faculties. That happened. But not because it didn't like science. It was because Galileo didn't. The issue with Galileo was that he was teaching in schools what he could not yet prove, the very antithesis of scientific inquiry. The ridiculous idea that the church doesn't like science ignores the fact that Galileo was teaching in a Catholic university in the first place, that the church invented the scientific method, that the father of genetics and theorist of the Big Bang Theory were both Catholic priests. This has never been true and is the result of 19th century propaganda against the church.
Well, he wasn't supposed to be teaching that in a Catholic university. It hadn't been proven yet. Oh, but we know for a fact that a woman came out of a man's rib. The whole of women came out of a man's rib. Oh yeah, and the two of them begat the whole world from Eden. So that confirmed that the sun is the center of the solar system. Is this hearsay? Man, Catholic YouTube, I can't with this. You want to know a 5-goat head cult? It's the Catholic Church. Moving on. Number 3, Hippasus. Passus. What a name. This was way, way back in the day. He was a Pythagorean philosopher. Now, a lot of us know Pythagoras from the Pythagorean theorem. You know how to figure out the sides of a triangle. I'll put it here. We know him as a mathematician. But Pythagoras also had a mystery school. Ooh, a mystery school. Ooh, I love the idea of a mystery school. If I ever start a school, it's going to be called a mystery school, and I'm not going to tell anybody. It's just going to be me. It's a mystery. It's just a mystery school. Anyway, all kidding aside, Pythagoras was the leader of his own mystery school, so he had a lot of followers. Pythagorean mathematicians, like I said, back in the day, natural sciences and occult sciences were kind of like mashed up together. So it wasn't, oh, this person is an occultist and this person is a scientist. They were kind of all, all mixed up. And if you look at some of the work from Newton, you're like, wow, Newton, the guy who discovered gravity and calculus, also was an occultist, like in kind of a way he was. He had this thing about the apocalypse. It's not important. We're not going to talk about Newton, but so Pythagoras has a mystery school. And like schools are, like groups are, as we discussed in the last video about boxes, the mystery school had certain things that it believed in. What Hippasus did was go against the beliefs of this mystery school. I'm going to tell you one of the legends, and I'm almost certain that this legend isn't completely real, but it is the legend that is out there. And that is that Hippasus and Pythagoras and a bunch of other old heads were on a boat, because back in the day, you're on a boat a lot. People just be on boats because they have to get from one place to another. It's Greece. There's a lot of islands. This is what we're doing, So they're on a boat, and Hippasus is there, and he's like doing math, as they do, and he discovers irrational numbers. Irrational numbers? What? Irrational numbers are numbers that can't be expressed as a fraction. So pi is an irrational number because it goes on forever. 3.141, 5, 9, 26, blah, 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 blah. Just keeps going on. The square root of 2, that's a irrational number because it just goes on 1.41, something, ever, forever and ever, ever. So you can see it on a calculator, but it can't be expressed as a fraction. And the Pythagorean school was like, that's not true. All numbers are rational numbers. Now, you may know rational numbers simply as numbers, unless you actually work in the math field or have to work with numbers a lot. You're just like, oh, you mean numbers? Yeah, I mean numbers. So the Pythagorean school was like, okay, every number out there can be expressed as a fraction. And Hippasus was like, actually, this number can't. And then Pythagoras was like, what? And he's like, yo, this number can't be expressed as a fraction. Express the square root of 2 as a fraction. And they were like, shut up, Hippasus, and they drown him. That's the legend. The legend is that Pythagoras and Pythagorean followers drowned Hippasus because he discovered irrational numbers. Is this true? Another legend says that Hippasus figured out how to put a dodecahedron inside of a sphere. And maybe he was able to discover irrational numbers by doing this. Not exactly sure. This also upset them and he was drowned. So that's another legend. Another legend has it that he was simply run out of town for the irrational numbers. Why do I say that I don't necessarily believe that this is true? I say that because it's unlikely that they didn't know about the square root of 2 before this. It's unlikely they didn't know about pi before this. Like, think that the Great Pyramids of Giza, they were built like 2,000 years before Hippasus was said to have been drowned. They knew about irrational numbers. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say they knew about irrational numbers. So it's unlikely the Greeks discovered it. Also, we don't have an ancient historian that says specifically Hippasus was drowned for discovering irrational numbers. The legend has it that the person who discovered irrational numbers was drowned. And there's another legend that Hippasus was drowned. So they say Hippasus was drowned for discovering irrational numbers. But we don't have clear-cut evidence that this happened. Whatever happened, things did not turn out well for Hippasus. And that is because he was too smart for his own good. Just be quiet. Just doesn't matter if your boss is wrong. He should have just chilled on that boat, gone on a pleasure cruise. And when they're trying to figure out the circumference of a circle, he'll be like, it's impossible to calculate. Who knows? I don't know how a dodecahedron gets inside a sphere. None of my business. He'd still be dead today. It's been like thousands of years. It wouldn't have made a difference. You're still going to die. Whatever. R.I.P. Hippasus. We remember you. This next one is probably the most infuriating because this man was a botanist and a geneticist, and he dedicated his life to solving world hunger. And what did he get for it? He starved to death in a Soviet prison camp. That's what you get for trying to help people. Nikolai Ivanovic Vavilov. This one hit close to home because my little sister is a geneticist. And I talked to her about it, and she was just like, I cannot believe that this happened, but this can happen. Basically, he was a respected scientist. He had spent his life studying seeds and crops and trying to make sure that the starvation and the famine that he went through as a child was not repeated. The science that he believed in, the correct science that has since been proven, and was proven at the time, so this is sort of infuriating, did not correspond to what the science that Stalin liked. Basically, Vavilov believed in heredity, in genetics. Do you remember back in the day when we had to study fruit flies and it was dominant recessive genes and this matches up and that matches up and we get to see what carries over from generation to generation, all that stuff, heredity, basic genetics? Well, Vavilov believed that, right? I thought that's what it was. I thought this was how things worked. It is how things worked. It is how things worked, but it wasn't the way Stalin wanted things to work. It wasn't popular in the Soviet Union at the time. This other scientist, this man by the name of Trofim Lysenko, a man who looks so much like a villain, I don't even know why this was a question. He believed that heredity is environmental. Now, we know about epigenetics. We know that environment does play a role, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about crops and seed crops and so forth. And so he believed that a crop would take on the characteristics of the things that it was around, not how genetics works. It is not one of those things where it's even a question, because we'd known about genetics for a while, at least at this level. My sister actually explained this to me. She's like, those squares don't explain everything. There's more to it than that. But in this particular case, no, Lysenko was wrong. And this shouldn't have actually been up for debate, because people in the West already knew this and knew this for a long, long time. Because if Lysenko was right, then all of the American children would look like their black mammies, and they don't. So people in the West were like, Lysenko, your science is dumb. And Lysenko was like, screw the West and screw everybody who doesn't believe in what I believe in. I'm going to send him to the camps. And his friend Stalin was like, yeah, send him to the camps. And so Stalin sent him to the camps. Stalin killed a lot of people. Stalin killed a lot of smart people, a lot of scientists. He killed his generals. Stalin was a dummy. Stalin was like king of the dummies. I'm sorry. If you are a Stalin supporter out there, what is the matter with you? This guy was a complete idiot. You don't send your generals to die. You need them for war. You need your scientists to eat. So Vavilov was sentenced to death. His sentence was commuted to life in prison in one of these camps. He ended up dying of starvation. And then when his son started asking questions, they ice picked him in the head and said he died in an avalanche. Because this is what you get for trying to help people. This is what you get. Especially if you're in a country that doesn't appreciate that. Especially if you're in a country where reason takes a backseat to popularity and you just have to say the right thing and not the correct thing. So Vavilov died. Later, his sentence was overturned by Khrushchev. Khrushchev's a good dude, but what does it do to overturn someone's sentence 10 years later? What does it do? Vavilov's dead. His son is dead. It doesn't matter. But for the history books, it does matter. For the history books, it was good that Khrushchev did this. That was FedEx. It wasn't the Inquisition being like, Maya, asking too many questions. Stop talking about Vavilov. No, it was FedEx. But for posterity's sake, the Soviet Union officially recognized Vavilov's work and now considers him a hero. And Lysenko is kind of like the biggest asshole in science. The biggest asshole in science award goes to Lysenko for having done this and for believing in such stupid theories. Also attributed to Lysenko is another famine. So farmers planted their crops too close together. They planted them badly. And what happened? Crop failure. What happens with crop failure? Death, famine, starvation. Idiot. How are you in such a high position? It just repeats, doesn't it? This has gone through all throughout history. And these dummies are in this super high position who have the power of life and death over brilliant people, because I guess the brilliant people just wanted to do science and weren't so ambitious. Number 1 on the list, Giordano Bruno. What a brilliant thinker. He wasn't a scientist or a mathematician. He was a pure philosopher. He was straight up a thinker, a reasoner. And he's like, well, if this is true, then this is true. Bruno started his life in the Catholic Church as a Dominican friar, and he was brilliant. So brilliant that they kind of let it slide that he wasn't thinking what he was supposed to be thinking. He would question things. He was like, did a virgin really give birth? Is Jesus really the Son of God? Does it matter if Jesus was the Son of God? And they're like, don't ask those questions. Just read the book and don't read those other books. Just read this book, don't read those books. Eventually, it didn't work out for him as a Dominican friar. He started to travel and he took work as a philosopher, as a teacher. He formulated brilliant ideas that were so far beyond his time. He figured out that the stars that we see in the sky, which everybody else thought were just like twinkling diamonds or whatever, I don't know what they thought. He figured out that they were stars and that they were other suns and that there were probably Earths around those suns, other planets. And he said, look, the universe is huge. It's filled with suns, and each of those suns have their own planets. People are like, you are crazy, Bruno. That is crazy. How could you possibly think that? He was way ahead of his time, way too ahead of his time. He also came up with these memory techniques, which he was able to teach. It was supposed to improve your memory. These memory techniques are what really got him into trouble because he was traveling around Europe. He taught in Paris, he taught in Germany. This guy from Venice, this rich guy from Venice is like, hey, Bruno, come and teach me about memory. Teach me your techniques. He's like, oh, I don't know if I should go back there. The Inquisition is kind of getting out of hand. So he's like, okay, let me go back and teach this guy about memory techniques. This is a very bad idea because this fella didn't like Bruno. He thought that Bruno was holding out some of his techniques. He expected his memory to improve more than it did. It's like, well, maybe you're just not that special, fella. Maybe that's what it is. But no, he blamed Bruno. He said that he wasn't teaching him all he had paid him to teach him. He also said that he thought that Bruno might have been messing around with his wife. Was Bruno messing around with his wife? I don't know. I'm going to say no. I'm going to give Bruno the benefit of the doubt and call this guy the jerk. He reported Bruno to the Inquisition, and he said, this guy holds heretical beliefs. So they arrested Bruno. They arrested Bruno and kept him in prison for years. And they tried him, and he was found guilty. Now, Bruno could have helped himself a little bit along the way. One thing to note is that Bruno constantly got into fights with his cellmates about the nature of religion. His cellmates were often friars, which, can you talk about Stockholm Syndrome here? Like, you're all monks, you're all friars, and you're all in prison. Maybe Bruno isn't your enemy. Maybe it's the church. I don't know. Seems like it might be the church. Maybe not Bruno. Anyway, props to Bruno for not backing down. He didn't back down to his cellmates. He didn't back down to the Inquisition. Now, the Inquisition, basically, the points of the Inquisition, why they thought Bruno was a heretic, was if you have many suns and many planets, do you have many Jesuses? There's only one Christ, and so there's only one earth. Duh. And so they burned him at the stake. They burned him alive at the stake. And for a long time, the evidence of this was just lost. The Catholic Church was like, maybe something happened to Bruno. We don't know. Anything could have happened. A lot of stuff happens, you know? Who knows what happens? It's like, Catholic Church, you do because you write everything down all the time. We know you know what happened. Catholic Church is like, well, when Napoleon came through, he took a lot of our documents and then he destroyed them. So we don't know. Maybe Napoleon destroyed the documents that said what happened to Bruno. So Catholic Church doesn't know any better. But then a document of his execution actually came to light in the 1860s. And then they were like, okay, all right, we burned him at the stake. You got us. So now we do have evidence. There's definitive proof of what happened to Bruno. It's not just hearsay. The Catholic Church murdered this man for knowing too much. And then they built a statue at the site of his execution where he was set aflame by this committee of jerk-offs, a committee of jerk-offs. The committee of jerk-offs has caused so much trouble to the human race. It seems like no matter where you go, there's a committee of jerk-offs screwing things up. Regardless, there is now a statue of Bruno at the place of his execution. And of course, the Catholic Church asked for this statue to be taken down. Doesn't look good for them. Yeah, no, it looks really bad what you did to Bruno, Catholic Church. Then I saw this video on YouTube of some guy trying to defend it. They're like, he wasn't a scientist, he was just a philosopher. Like, how could he know? Well, he knew and he was right. So that's the list. That's just 5 examples out of many hundreds of examples. I could make a video like this once a year, well into retirement, and always have enough material. Well, they say knowledge is power for a reason. Maybe they should say knowledge threatens power. Because in this case, these 5 had all of the knowledge, but they still wound up dead. I guess the knowledge wasn't what won out. I guess the armed people willing to murder others is what won out. You know what's more powerful than knowledge? Guns. You know what's more powerful than knowledge? Knives. You know what's more powerful than knowledge? Institutions with armed men willing to murder others. But knowledge is power, guys. Knowledge is power. It is if it's within those institutions. If you're just on your own with a bunch of knowledge, you're a target. Isn't that sad? That's just real, okay? This video just got real. Anyway, I am eternally grateful to be born into the 20th, 21st century, where you can have all of the knowledge ever is available at our fingertips. There's no need to kill someone for knowledge. There's no need to commit acts of violence for knowledge, because you can put all the knowledge out there and nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to learn anything. Everyone wants to look at butts. It doesn't matter. You gotta love America in the 21st century. Beats getting burned at the stake, huh? Thanks for watching. Subscribe.